Welcome to another episode of Community Relations Corner, where we discuss issues of concern to New York's Jewish community and our friends and neighbors and partners all over the New York metropolitan area. I'm your host, Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, the JCRC-NY. And on each episode of Community Relations Corner, we are joined by guests representing the political, religious, economic, and diverse community leadership in New York, many of whom I've had the honor and pleasure of getting to know during the course of my tenure at JCRC. Together, we're going to discuss current events impacting New York's Jewish community and its neighbors, as well as the state of the city, the state of the state, the state of the nation, and at times even the state of the world. Today, I'm excited to continue our Black History Month series with a very dear friend, Juanita Scarlett, a partner at Bolton StJohns, a government relations and public affairs firm in New York, and recently named as one of the 100 most influential New Yorkers. Wow. In 2015, Juanita also traveled with JCRC-NY on one of our missions to Israel, which is where I really got to get to know her. And welcome.
Thank you. I am so thrilled to join you today. And that was an amazing trip. I'm so looking forward to us talking about it and all the great memories that we have. And thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Juanita. As you said, right at the top over your right shoulder is the book Power Brokers. Yes. And to be named in City and State's 100 most influential, I guess that gets stamped in your passport as well. So let's talk about how you got to where you are. Let's hear more about you, where you grew up, who inspired you to get where you are today.
Absolutely. So I grew up in the heart of the South. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm number 9 of 12 kids, all born to the same parents.
Wow, nine of a dozen.
Yeah, a dozen. There were 6 boys and 6 girls.
Really?
Yes. We did lose our older brother a few years ago to kidney disease, but it was the most amazing childhood. We never knew if we were poor or rich because what we had was just the incredible love in the family. My parents were inspirations to me, to my family, to our entire community. My mom was just incredibly brilliant, so kind, really beautiful. She didn't work outside of the home, as you can imagine, with 12 kids, but she had a degree. She went to the local college and had a degree in architectural design.
Wow.
My dad was a real history maker, and we drew inspiration from both of them. My father was born in 1914. He was quite a bit older than my mom, but he was the first Black conductor for the railroad. When he started out as a Pullman porter, which was, as you know, from A. Philip Randolph and the movement, it was considered a great job for Black men to work on the railroad. He did railroading all of his life.
He wore that red hat.
He did, and when he first started out, but he worked his way up. He started out, I think he went in to work for the railroad when he was a teenager, maybe 19, 20 years old, did it his entire life. But over the years, he would continually apply to become a conductor, to kind of move up the ranks. And he would get rolled, as they called it. It was when a white worker with less seniority would decide that he wanted that job that the Black workers were applying for. So each time he was constantly rolled, even though he'd been there, he had many, many years. He actually sued. He had a precedent-setting case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's called Scarlett versus Seaboard Coastline. So really? I ask everyone to go take a look on Juris Doctrine. Yeah, and it set a precedent for collective bargaining because they all of the Black workers banded together, joined his lawsuit. and they decided to open up opportunities on the railroad. He was allowed to apply and he became a conductor after many, many years. Not to kind of gloss over the fight, they did a lot of organizing among the Black workers for the railroad, but it really was amazing for him to have this case that went so far up. Three of my siblings, my brothers, went into railroading. They followed my dad, who became kind of a legend.
Really?
So Seaboard Coastline became CSX, which is
Yes.
a very, very well-known,
Yeah.
well-established railroading operator in the South. So a lot of my siblings, a lot of the men in my family went into that profession. The women in my family, because my mom was very, very strict with us, she firmly believed that education was a great equalizer, and she pushed all of the girls to absolutely go to college and beyond. My oldest sister, the physician, my youngest sister is the 16th Black female with a PhD in physics. She went to Yale. She's, brilliant. Most of the women in my family went into medicine. And so I just, my childhood was shaped by all of these stories and watching my siblings go on to become the first in their particular profession. And it has impacted me to this day. Is part of the reason I, want to be on the right side of history, to always fight for social justice and social equity, and particularly for Black women who, have struggled coming from the South. So that's my childhood. I got a scholarship to Syracuse University to study journalism. Thought I was going to be a reporter. I ended up marrying one, but I went, my first job in government, which I think we'll probably talk about as we talk about Lori, was working in the press shop for Governor Mario Cuomo back in the late 90s, but back in the late 80s, 89, 1990. I went to work in Albany. I started out as the clip girl. I was a person who would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would read all the newspapers, and then I faxed to the mansion a summary of all the stories while I went to a 9-to-5 job. So I did this for 6 months as an intern for the governor's office. And within 6 months, they invited me to apply for a job in Albany to work for the governor. And it changed my life. It was my first government job. And I've been in love with government politics and how you can use government to help community ever since.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing story, and thank you for sharing it. I do want to segue into Black women in empowerment and Alari, but before I do, what impediments did you encounter along the way because of your race? Because you are Black, you grew up, as you said, in the heart of the South in Jacksonville, Florida, and here you are in the Northeast, and you were in Syracuse, et cetera. What were the experiences that are seared in your memory bank that you can share with us?
Oh, sure. So, I think every Black woman in politics, or really across the board of professions, will tell you that there have been so many times that we were not either in the room where it happens because we were overlooked and didn't have a seat at the table, or if we were lucky enough to make it into those rooms. And I remember many, many instances of being in a room, having an idea about how to approach something, whether it was in the Attorney General's office or the governor's office where I worked, only to have that idea kind of overlooked until my white male counterpart said the same thing. Then suddenly it was like, oh, that's a great idea. I could have said it, 5 minutes before, and no reaction, no response. I think that happens quite a bit for women. Either you're not in the room or you're invisible when you're in the room. And while I do love my jobs and the career path I've taken, and don't want to talk in particular about any elected official that I've worked for, I've found that to be the case in politics where you were often overlooked. Your opinion didn't really mean anything until someone else, a white male, typically validated that opinion. That sticks with me to this day. That's why I think I have worked really hard to try and bring along the next generation of Black women, because we do come to the table with incredible ideas. And I do think having your voice heard is so incredibly important. It was part of the reason why my group, the Lori Sisterhood, formed, so that we can, have that seat at the table, but also have a voice and let our voice be heard. We work really hard to.
Yeah, but before you get into the details of
Sure.
Olori, please share with our viewing audience why it's named Olori. What does OLORI represent?
Sure.
And how it was that, how many are you? Just give us some background on how it is that this group gelled.
Absolutely. Well, so we are calling ourselves Olori now. That wasn't our original name. I will say that. It's Yoruba for queen. It's an African word that means that you're a queen. When we started out, we actually started out in 1999. So we've been together as a sisterhood and a network for a very long time. In 1999, I was tapped to be the first Black female press secretary for a statewide elected official when I went to work for Elliot Spitzer in the Attorney General's office. So as late as 99, there had not been a chief spokesperson for a statewide office in New York. And a number of the ladies, including Lupe Todd, who's a member, there are 9 of us, the core group, we came together, we looked around the room, we decided to call ourselves at that time WIP, Women in Politics and Policy, WIPP. So, yes, there was such a small group of women in senior government roles in New York that we formed a bond, and it was just a natural affinity that we were seeing ourselves as the only women often, and especially the only women of color in meetings. So, over dinners, over conversation, we said we really need to network. We need to pull a group of women together. We need to make sure that we know someone in the Senate office, someone in the Assembly, someone in the governor's office. Our original goal was to pull Black women into government roles, to make sure that we had jobs in government offices. And it's still one of our goals today. It has evolved to being much more than that, where we want to have an impact on who's elected to offices across the country, because representation matters. It's so important to have someone who understands what Black families are going through, who understands what it takes to make change and move whole communities. When Black women get involved, whether it's voting or a healthcare issue or a policy issue, we bring our whole families. We've been caretakers for our families and everyone else's families, and often communities, across the board. So we know that to get change done, one of us needs to be in the room or have a role in an important policy issue. So Olori is a group that has been together since 99. We've added a few new members from the core group that started out, but our goals are to make sure there are Black women in government offices, because government can really be a partner to help families, to help make change, to make sure that Black women are elected to public office, because again, representation matters, making sure there are women who will fight for change for whole families and whole communities. Because Black women, honestly, we tap into all of our networks. When we go to the polls, we bring our family, we bring our clergy, we bring our sororities, we bring our social and professional organizations with us. And that's what we're working really hard to do right now. So if I find out that there is an opportunity to work on a campaign or to work on a policy issue, and maybe I'm conflicted out or I can't take time off to go work on the campaign, I will call one of my sisters and say, hey, I heard about this opportunity. I think you should go for it. I'm happy to put in a word for you. I do that all the time. All the ladies in the group, we look out for each other. We try to make sure that we're not just networking among our group, but we also look back, and we've all adopted mentees. We try to work with the next generation. If you think about it, I've been in government since 1990. For a long, long time. And, I'm getting a little long in the tooth to keep running out there, working on campaigns and to be involved. So it's really important for me to try and groom the next generation that's coming up, to make sure that we have young people with new, fresh ideas at the table. And so the Lori Sisterhood has reached out to the younger generation of Black women that are coming along, to make sure that we are bringing them to meetings, that we're bringing them to the government offices, that we're helping them with jobs at corporations outside of government. But the focus is very important for us.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. So let's take a look at the reality that there's a primary in June.
Yes.
And somebody, I think, tallied up that there are several hundred candidates who are running for the city council seats, as well as borough president and controller, city controller, obviously for mayor. So where, as an example, does Lori fit into that? And I think the basic question that I'm sure that our viewers are interested in, do you endorse, does Lori itself as a sisterhood endorse candidates?
We don't make a public endorsement as a network or an organization, but we do work for the candidates of our choice. For instance, there are 3 members of the group working on Ray McGuire's campaign.
Mm-hmm.
There is someone from the group working on Eric Adams' campaign. There's someone from the group working for Maya Wiley. And there's someone from the group working on Scott Stringer's campaign. So what we decide is that, we try and figure out who's the best candidate, who is speaking truth to power on our issues, who really respects and understands the role of Black women in public policy. And if there's a relationship there, one of the women who went to work for Ray McGuire's campaign decided to pull in 2 other women who are part of the group and not associated or attached to a particular campaign. That's what we do. That's how we network for each other. But we don't say the Lori Sisterhood has endorsed, because everyone, while we all are in this group, and but we all have our own professional careers, and
Right.
and some of us are at different places in
Right.
our careers right now, and have long-standing relationships with the candidates. I personally decided not to work on a campaign for many reasons, not simply because, not just because I know all of the candidates, and I do have a favorite that I think has been around and truly understands how the city works. But of course, my husband is moderating all of these debates. And I don't want a clash of our our interest in, we say that there is no conflict of interest because our interests align, but but he's moderating all of the debates, and so in the interest of fairness, I'm fitting it out.
we have to let the viewers know that Juanita is married to Errol Lewis, who is the host of Inside City Hall on New York One. He's also on CNN. He's also a columnist in the Daily News and a lot of other things.
Professor of journalism at CUNY.
And professor of journalism at CUNY. So that's Errol Lewis, but we decided to have the conversation with his better half.
Well, I will say, we teased about it that he's number 36 on the list, and I share 35 with 2 of my colleagues. So but he's also on that list.
Well, you're in the top 50. That makes a difference when you look online as to who the 100 are. You're in the top
Right.
50.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you feel optimistic about the advances that have been made by Black women in not only in politics, but in society as a whole? Have you seen, with us not talk about our respective ages, but have you seen over your tenure in the political arena as a journalist? I mean, how can you measure that the work that you're doing with Olari and maybe other activities is successful?
Well, I certainly do feel optimistic. I mean, it's interesting that people say Black women are sharing their moment in the sun, that we're now getting, attention, so that there's somehow a movement towards Black women. I don't think that's the case. I think that we've been out here in the background. And for some of us, I prefer the background. I really like trying to figure out policy issues and helping to put those forward. But the truth is, all of our hard work over the many, many years, the 2 decades, is paying off because we have someone like Tish James, who Tish as the Attorney General, when she took that step, it was so incredibly rewarding for us. I worked with Tish in the Attorney General's office when she ran our Brooklyn office for the Attorney General. So to see her assume this role is just wonderful. We've all worked to support her career, and she's doing amazing things. The same is true for Kamala Harris. A lot of the women in my sisterhood were a part of being on the ground, getting out the vote, knocking on doors, holding fundraisers. I held a fundraiser, co-hosted with some of the women for Kamala Harris. And it is just so amazing to see her as the first Black female vice president. I feel really hopeful. I see in her staff, seeing the women who were part of the new generation coming up, like Corinne Jean-Pierre and Simone Sanders. I'm quite a bit older than both of them, but to see them working in the White House in these historic positions, and then also to see white women who have never had the roles that we're seeing, like Jen Psaki, who's a press person. My background is in communications and government office. To see her leading the White House briefings is just so amazing. So I absolutely feel hopeful. I think there's strength in numbers, and I think that's why our sisterhood will continue to endure. We'll stand together because we know how important it is for that next generation of young people to come up and to understand the significance that Black women have been on the front lines of social justice movement since the history of this country. And it is just now that we are really getting some of the attention for all of our hard work. But I think it doesn't change the work that we're going to continue to do. We're going to continue to push for women to take their seat at the table, to be elected to offices across the country. We're going to continue to push for women to have the important policy positions. And it is an amazing time in our history.
Well, speaking about time, thank you. The month that we're having this conversation, as I mentioned at the top of the program, is Black History Month. Does that have any particular significance for you as an individual, as a Black woman? Does Olari, as an example, engage in specific initiatives geared to Black History Month? And if you could do anything to influence the impact of Black History Month, what would that be?
Well, we don't hold a special celebration. We honestly, in my family and in our group, we like to say Black History is every month. So it's so
it's like Mother's Day. It's like Mother's
Yes,
Day.
exactly. It's every day, it's every month. But I do appreciate the fact that the country as a whole will pay special attention to the people throughout history whose stories are not in textbooks, that you only hear about through word of mouth and folklore. So I really do appreciate the significance of the month, but it also reminds me just how important it is for people of color to tell their stories every single day. What we witness in the country when we see incidents of police brutality and misconduct, and we see shootings of Black unarmed men and women in their homes and in the streets, this month reminds me of just how important it is for you to speak your truth, for you to use your voice to shed light on what's happening across the country. It's important to put a focus on telling your own stories rather than letting someone else write your narrative. I mean, that's what I appreciate so much about Black journalists who are out there on the front lines, who are trying to bring stories forward that you hardly ever hear about. And with social media and, everyone with a video phone that can kind of capture those stories, I'm reminded that this is an important thing that we should be talking about and focusing on every year, every day, every month. That's what we're doing. I hope that people take away from Black History Month the lessons they've learned for individuals who had stories that have never been, that you can't read about in your history book, or you don't see blast across the television screen every day. But we will tell those stories in our communities, in our neighborhoods, through social media now. But yeah, I think we should all pay attention to the fact that Black history is every single day, and that we should focus on getting those stories out there every single day.
Yeah, we have a very similar approach to Jewish history and Jewish Heritage Month, which is, I think it's the month of April or May. We celebrate Jewish heritage all year round. Jewish heritage should not be limited to just, it started out as a week. JCRC established it. My predecessor established it as a Jewish Heritage Week. We expanded it to a month, and actually we expanded it to the entire year, Jewish Heritage New York. So speaking about New York, is Olari a New York organization, metropolitan area, national? Are there chapters elsewhere beyond the New York area?
There aren't chapters beyond New York. We're all New Yorkers. We live in different parts of New York. Quite a few of us are in Brooklyn, but in Queens and Harlem, throughout New York City. But what was so amazing about the story in the New York Times, the fact that it was picked up all over the world, quite frankly. It was run in its entirety in a Philadelphia paper. It was picked up in the Times of London. We saw it replicated in a newspaper in Africa. And I heard from people in other states, like my home state of Florida, members from my former classmates from high school who asked if they could join, or if they could start their own chapter. We would love to see a network of Black women across the country. And we certainly didn't create this idea. I think, the Donna Brazile, some of the women who were inspirations to us, they had their own group of Black women. Some of them, I think they call it the sisters, women in politics, with the same goal and philosophy of helping each other with government jobs and to help Black women run for office. We didn't invent the idea, but we are so thrilled that it is catching on, because one incredible article that in addition to other Black women wanting to start chapters, I've heard from my Latino sisters who are interested in putting together a group. And one of my colleagues at Bolton StJohns, Teresa Gonzalez, has for years tried to pull together a group of Latino women to focus on very similar goals. And I think they're now getting it off the ground. So I'm thrilled we could be somewhat of an inspiration to women elsewhere. And I know that we've drawn drawn on inspiration from women like Donna Brazile and Tina Flanoy and others who have come before us.
And I'm confident, although I'm not aware of the specifics, that within the Jewish community, there likely are women who are engaged collectively or jointly in efforts to ensure that there's a presence of Jewish women in the political arena. Certainly, there have been very influential Jewish women in New York, going back to Bella Abzug, who actually taught Hebrew school in my father's synagogue in the Bronx, to a Liz Holtzman and many, many, many more. Yeah, so we have found in the Jewish community that politics is essential for ensuring the safety and security of our people and our ability to flourish. The same thing certainly should be true, and I think you're bearing it out in the Black community and the Latino community and peoples of color. I've also seen what's been happening in the South Asian community in New York, which is also circling its wagons and beginning to work more jointly than independently.
Absolutely. There really is strength in numbers, and it is amazing to see people come together to have a real stake in their community and to pursue policies that are going to impact their community. And it would be so great for all of our women's groups to get together to have conversations about our communities as a whole and, you know, how to move the issues for our families. So I would love to join with Jewish women and Latino women. My sister is in the struggle to figure out how we can work together.
That's terrific. And speaking about working together, you and your husband and your son live in Crown Heights.
Yes.
And we all know we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of the Crown Heights riots in August of 1991. So what have you seen within the neighborhood that hopefully provides some glimmer of opportunity towards the future of the improvement of relationships? Because after the civil rights movement, where the Jewish community, through very notable figures such as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched together with Dr. King, or Schwerner and Goodman, who were murdered together with Cheney in Mississippi. So where are we today? That fell apart. And there have been many efforts to try to put it back together again, to rebuild it. What's your perspective on that?
So I will tell you, I've been in Crown Heights now for 17 years, and I've seen the community grow and prosper together in a way that I couldn't have imagined before moving here. When the Crown Heights riots happened in 91, I was living and working in Albany for Governor Mario Cuomo, and my impression of the neighborhood and community really was shaped by the images that you saw on television, which were just so incredibly depressing and just for both sides. So when it was a really bleak picture. The brownstone that we live in now has been in our family since 1956.
Really?
So it is my father-in-law, my husband's father, bought this brownstone in 1956 when he was a precinct commander at the local precinct. He was a NYPD officer. He and one of his first cousins from Trinidad bought the home, and family would come over from Trinidad and stay here. And my husband, Errol Lewis, decided to move into the building. No one was living here when he graduated from Yale, from grad school. He went to Harvard and then Yale, and decided to come to Brooklyn to make a home and to work here. And I'll tell you, he has witnessed so many problems. It was literally like there was a line between where Black families lived and where Jewish families lived, even when I got here 17 years ago. But we joined forces with people like Devorah Haverson,
Right.
like Juanita Scarlett.
Right.
And every year, Arrow will host with them one Crown Heights. It's a festival that brings
Yeah.
together Black and Jewish families.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for nearly 2 decades.
Right.
We've been
JCRC is very, very, very engaged through Rabbi Bob Kaplan, who's our
okay.
director of our Center for Community Leadership, Intergroup Relations efforts. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, no, no. It's an amazing time to remind people of, where relationships were and how we need to work together. The festival is just that. It is one Crown Heights. We have taken our son Noah, who's now 15. Ever since he was really, really young, we've taken him to the Brooklyn. We've taken him to the Brooklyn Children's, the Brooklyn
Jewish
Children's
Children's Museum.
Museum.
Yeah.
And we had some incredibly fun memories of running around to Chocolat, which is one of the places there. But it is a concerted effort that we made to bring the families in the community together. We do it not just once a year at the festival. We try to have community events, block parties. We join with our neighbors. And honestly, Michael, I will say it's almost like the walls have come down since I've been here. There are people on our block where it was a Black family before. It might be a family, not Orthodox, but a young Jewish family. The neighborhoods are less segregated, I think, honestly, because people who really care have made real decisions to bring people together. So the neighborhood is changing. And it feels much more cohesive. You don't have to wonder if you can walk down a certain block or if you should be on that block. And we look forward to it. There was no festival last year, but the one Crown Heights Festival has really brought a lot of our neighbors together. And I think we should do it everywhere. If you start with housing, the housing stock in New York, as we know, there are neighborhoods that continue to be incredibly segregated. But I think the fact that we sort of started with making a commitment in this neighborhood, and we're going to be here. We told our son, no matter what, you cannot sell this house. You might, if you move away for a short time, we expect you to raise your kids here and to really put a stake in the ground. It's a lot of work. It's a over 100-year-old brownstone. But the fact that Errol's dad had the foresight of wanting to own property and build a community, and he did it here in Crown Heights. So it's work that we look forward to doing all the time.
Yeah, I heard a similar story from Jennifer Jones Austin from the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, who was also on Community Relations Corner about the house that they live in, which was her parents' house.
Yes.
Not that far from where you are.
Right.
But speaking of Black, and thank you for your answer. Speaking of Black-Jewish relations, Israel, the state of Israel, is central to the agenda of our community, of our faith, of ensuring its safety, its security, its future. And as I mentioned, introducing you in 2015, both you and Errol traveled with us on the mission. What are your fondest recollections of that trip? What stands out for you from having spent a very intense week on the ground, morning and early morning, late at night? But what do you take and what did you carry back to your son Noah?
So honestly, it really was the most impactful, meaningful trip that I've ever taken. And I am so grateful to the JCRC for inviting me and allowing me to bring my husband along on the trip. I grew up in a devoutly religious household. So places that I'd read about and only dreamed of seeing, it was so incredibly wonderful to actually see them. I was so amazed to sail the Sea of Galilee. I have so many incredible memories. Seeing the Beatitudes on the Mount of Olives, walking the same path as Jesus on the Via Dolorosa, visiting Yad Vashem. I will never forget that experience to commemorate the more than 6 million Jews who lost their lives. And also meeting with the Palestinian people to hear firsthand about the complexities of that area, that part of the world. It was just so awesome and humbling. Great experience. I'll also never forget the trip to the Western Wall.
Mhm.
Before I left, I told all my family members, and again, I have a huge family, that I was going on the trip. So they all sent me prayers. They
Uh-huh.
sent me prayers to put in the wall and to
Yeah.
make a little statement. And honestly, it was just incredible to actually do that. At the time, we were praying for one family member who had stage 4 colon cancer. And thank
Mm.
God she is, I believe in the power of prayer. She is
Wow.
alive and well and doing incredibly well.
Mm.
Everyone gave me a prayer to put in the wall. That was incredible to me. I'll never forget Shabbat's dinner with you and lighting the candle. And the food was just amazing. It was just so incredible. And the King David Hotel. I fondly remember every part of the trip. And we brought pictures home. We created a little slideshow to show our family in Florida. And I have siblings that are, ready to make their crusade to go on a religious mission. Our son Noah was so upset that he didn't get to go with us. So I was going to say at the end of this, he's 15 now, probably old enough that we look forward to going back, and we look forward to taking Noah with us. But it was just an amazing trip.
Thank you. And what was your reaction though when you saw that questionnaire coming out of the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, about elected officials refraining from taking such trips to Israel?
I think it's so unfortunate. I think it's so misguided and honestly dangerous for the DSA to ask any candidate to refrain from visiting. Promoting ignorance is not the way to go. I think
Mm.
the mission to Israel, I mean, their concerns about it being a propaganda trip are so unfounded. We went to Ramallah, we went to Bethlehem, we met with the Palestinian people. The only way you can really see and get a real understanding of any place that you may have heard about or read about is to go and see for yourself. I think that everyone should go on the trip. Everyone who could should take a trip. I think everyone should, expect to have real heartfelt conversations with people on both sides to try and get a better understanding. And I think it's incredibly unfortunate that the DSA is asking people to refrain. I personally think that the DSA should take a hard look inward. The DSA in New York, that the group has been quite honestly disrespectful and dismissive of Black women. We're talking about empowering Black women. I think that at least the New York version, in addition to being incredibly insulting to the Jewish community, I find them often dismissive and disrespectful to Black women like myself, who've been around forever fighting for just causes.
Yeah.
We don't have to walk through their showing up at Lori Kumble's house or Danny Drum's house. They're,
Yeah.
the approach of bullying and pushing people to go their route for what could be seen as a power grab is really unfortunate.
Yeah. We couldn't be any closer on the same page. But speaking about issues that we care about, I know that you care about small businesses.
Yes.
And through this pandemic, small businesses have been terribly impacted. We may have viewers who are small business owners. What hope is there that there's potential for recovery in New York, in the borough of Brooklyn, but elsewhere as well, and particularly those that are minority owned that are challenged just to begin with?
Right. Nationally, I think it's something like 41% of Black owned businesses have disappeared since the pandemic,
Mm.
compared to 17% of white owned companies. In New York, before COVID, I think the statistic is there were 40% of the New York population that lived at or near poverty, and now we're up to 75%. Yeah, I'm hopeful that the mayoral candidates who are talking about creating loan and grant funds, opportunities to come out of the mayor's office and the comptroller's office that would really help small businesses get back on their feet. There is talk of businesses reaching out to the Wall Street and bigger firms to put together a package that would not just provide the needed access to capital, which has historically been a reason why small and Black-owned businesses don't really thrive. It's because they don't get the traditional lending, the access to capital needed. So there is talk from at least a number of the candidates of pooling resources to create these job opportunities through contracting services, through investments from the comptroller's office, but also to create an opportunity that brings together the chambers of commerce, the business improvement districts, and partners in and out of government to mentor those firms, to identify capital. I think that we have to do all of the above. You know, there's not one way to fix it, but I think identifying funding that's coming from the federal government and that exists in the state and city budgets that can really help these firms get back on their feet. It should be a huge priority for the next mayor, and some of them seem to really get it.
So that's a great segue into my last question for you. We're just a little bit more than a month away from Passover, and at the Seder, which you probably have attended a Seder or two in your lifetime, right at the beginning, we have the four questions that are asked, and it begins with, why is this night different from all other nights? So my question for you, why is this mayoral election different than all other mayoral elections? What's so unique about this year?
Well, everything is virtual. So the boots on the ground is happening in a very different way. The door knocking, getting out the vote in the traditional ways that we've seen people mobilize their base, that's not happening right now. So the candidates have to come up with, well, I should say very few of the candidates are actually knocking on doors. I've seen in some of the city council races, there are candidates that will go with the full mask and they'll knock on the door and step back and pass out literature. So I think it's caused the candidates to be much more creative in how they're approaching this election cycle. At least one of them is already up on the air, which is considered early. Sean Donovan has this great commercial with former President Obama that is, I think is incredibly smart. I think Sean's commercial will really reach people who are home, who are stuck working from home, like most of us are. If he can sustain that throughout, it will help with the name recognition issue that he has. He's not a well-known quantity of person in New York. Many of them are doing these great Zoom parties, which I think is fascinating. They're on social media. So the fact that we're virtual is one thing that is unlike any other campaign cycle for mayor. The other, of course, is ranked choice voting. I think it's really hard to know exactly how ranked choice voting is going to play out. I've heard at least one candidate is saying to everyone, I don't have to be your first choice, but please make me your second. Please. So if enough people are, picking him as their second choice, it could work out. So I think those two things make this election really unique. I still think, though, that candidates should pick up the phone. They should do phone banking. They should get their family members to phone bank. They should get their friends and their relatives to phone bank. And then they should do what I'm doing. I'm texting to my friends and family my 1 through 5 choice. Like, here's what I think. So I think if they were smart, they would do the same thing, where they would really try to take into account ranked choice voting. They would tap into all of their networks and do the good old fashioned phone calls. I've gotten a call from two of the candidates who are running, mostly fundraising calls from their fundraising team, but the actual candidates have called as well, which I think works really well, because I'm like, oh, great, it's good to hear from you. I'll remember, okay, I'll move you up to number 2.
Thank you. And I can't thank you enough, Juanita, for spending so much time with us on Community Relations Corner. So is there any last word that you'd like to share with our viewing audience before we say farewell?
Well, I am so appreciative, honestly, of your time, Michael. I love the mission that we went on. And I love the fact that we all stay in touch. Like that's something, sometimes you meet people in different points of your life, and it's like, okay, yes, we'll have dinner, although we still need to have that dinner as our reunion dinner that we've been talking about. But the fact that we do reach out, we do stay in touch is so special and important. Everyone on that mission, we try to keep each other in mind for birthdays, for milestones, and I love that. Again, I am looking forward to taking Noah. He's got the right name. The last thing that was really remarkable to me, the boat we sailed on the Sea of Galilee.
Galilee,
yeah. It was called Noah.
Oh, really? Oh, I remember that.
I took a picture of it. So he's looking forward to his trip as well. But I'm very grateful for your time today and for our friendship. And I look forward
likewise.
To with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And our thanks for all of us who are viewing, to Juanita Scarlett for spending such an amazing hour with us and sharing really from her heart, her feelings about her own community, and particularly about Black women becoming empowered. And it's now my power to be able to close this show and to thank Juanita for joining us, to thank all of you for viewing us, and inviting you next week to Community Relations Corner. And just a promo for another event that we're doing on Thursday night. We have the holiday of Purim coming up in 2 weeks, a week from Friday. And Purim is a very joyous celebration in the Jewish tradition, going back to the book of Esther, which is in the Bible. And one of the traditions is to eat a three-cornered triangular shaped cookie called hamantaschen, with different fillings in it, traditional fillings and not so traditional fillings. So on Thursday night at 8 p.m., we're going to have 8 members of the New York State Assembly, one from each of the counties that we represent, from Suffolk, Nassau, the 5 boroughs, and Westchester, all taste different hamantaschen with different fillings and compare notes. It's going to be a lot of fun. 8 p.m. on Thursday night. Just check Facebook and other social media for the promo for that event. And but next week we will be back on the air with Community Relations Corner and another guest. Once again, thank you, Toda Rabah, to Juanita Scarlett, and shalom to everyone. Take good care.
Shalom.